Hello friends and welcome to the Hill Podcast. In the last episode, in part 1 of our talk on combating nihilism, we were talking more about why purpose is the antidote to nihilism. In this video, we're going to talk about how exactly to find purpose and how your purpose needs to be aligned with your individual makeup. And this will lead to higher feelings of positive emotion, feelings of more success, and by aligning your purpose to fit you specifically, well, this will make your journey inherently unique. And as human beings, we all want to feel unique while we're on our life's journey. Last episode, I talked about how most people don't just, come into this world born with purpose. Some rational thought and some deep analysis has to be done in order to come to one's purpose. And so, in order to find purpose, you have to do analysis, and this can be done through one of two modes. This can be done conversationally with a close friend, a family member, or perhaps a psychologist who can speak to your skills and your individual makeup in an objective fashion without inserting biases. Or this can be done via self-analysis, and you also have to take an objective look at yourself as to be able to pull out your different skills. And so when you're doing this analysis, there are 4 particular things that you should be looking for. And this would be to identify your big 5 personality traits, your skills, your physical attributes, and the environment or background that you grew up in. So the first of these 4 facets that I suggest that you look into is your big 5 personality traits. And like I said, this can be done through discussion or self-analysis. Side note, there are tons of ways to have access to a big 5 personality trait, and just type it in on the internet and you can literally take a bunch of surveys. It's super easy. Big 5 personality tests are highly effective. There's a good amount of clinical evidence to suggest that taking big 5 personality tests are effective for identifying individual traits and really some of the most important factors within one's personality. These big 5 traits have been found across all humans and all cultures, so it's a pretty valuable thing to understand about oneself when considering aligning your purpose and your struggle in a specific direction. So the first of the big 5 traits is openness. This is a trait that is often associated with creativity, with one's want to go into big ideas and kind of establish a more artistic view of the world. Individuals high in openness might consider aligning themselves to philosophical analysis, perhaps theoretical science, or one of 2 things in the arts. You could do performing arts or you could do visual arts. And individuals who are high in openness, well, you'd be very successful because these things are creative endeavors, and being high in openness is extremely valuable in these fields. Individuals who are low in openness tend to take a more pragmatic approach to life, where everything has to have a practical end. If you are lower in openness, you might consider a field like practical engineering. You might consider a field like applied sciences, where there is definitely a means to the madness. You have an end goal in mind. You don't necessarily want to think for the sake of thinking. You want to make sure that there is some practical reason why you are committing your time to this activity. The next trait in the big 5 is conscientiousness. And individuals who are higher in conscientiousness have a great amount of impulse control. They're able to be successful with task completion because they can stay on one task for longer periods of time than their counterparts who are lower in conscientiousness. If you are high in conscientiousness, you may consider aligning your purpose to something that gives you a high degree of freedom. Perhaps you could be an entrepreneur because you would be able to stay focused on the task at hand without getting lost in the endless possibilities of being an entrepreneur. And on the other coin, if you are lower in conscientiousness, you may consider a job that kind of forces you into a framework where you have more regimen and more rules and regulations to follow, as to not become lost in the sauce per se. As you're learning about these traits, don't view them as negative or positive traits. Instead, look at them objectively so you can get to know yourself without desiring specific trait outcomes. This is all about learning about yourself. So don't answer the questions in a specific way that will put you higher in agreeableness or higher in conscientiousness for the sake of appearing a certain way. You have to be completely honest as you fill out these surveys. The next trait in the big 5 personality traits is extroversion. And a lot of people think that extroversion is just enjoying spending time around other people. However, it's more of how one recharges their battery, and that is their mental energy. Individuals who are higher in extroversion tend to recharge their batteries from spending time around other people. And perhaps you might consider a purpose that has public speaking. Perhaps you might consider a purpose where you see large volumes of people over long periods of time, because this will recharge you and you enjoy being the center of attention as an extrovert. And on the contrary, people who are lower in extroversion, also known as introverts, enjoy time alone. They recharge their mental battery from being alone, being in solitude, as they can hear their thoughts and they can gain a clearer understanding of the world around them in solitude. To further clarify, introverts don't necessarily dislike one-on-one situations, and thus introverts would probably be well suited to do one-on-one jobs where you can speak with individuals, let's say in a patient healthcare practitioner relationship, or in a one-on-one consultant job where you speak with, one or two people at a time. The next trait in the Big Five is agreeableness. And people who are high in agreeableness tend to be, more friendly. They don't stick to their guns as much, and when it comes to discussion of different opinions, people who are higher in agreeableness tend to forego their own opinions to potentially take on the views of others as to become more friendly in a conversation. If you're higher in agreeableness, you might consider aligning your purpose to, things that involve dealing with people and conflict, because you're able to be a valuable mediator in conflict and you won't get wrapped up in your biases and your opinions in specific situations as you are agreeable. Individuals who are lower in agreeableness are generally those who stick to their opinions regardless of what other people think. People who are lower in agreeableness generally don't care how they appear to others, which has its upside for sure. But interestingly, individuals who are extremely low in agreeableness tend to display dark triad behaviors. And to further clarify what that means, there's a bit of Machiavellianism, generally not caring about others and putting yourself above all others, regardless of if they get hurt. And the last of these traits is neuroticism, which pretty much defines how much negative emotion an individual will feel at a given point in time. Individuals who are higher in neuroticism are a lot more likely to experience anxiety and depression, and individuals who are lower in neuroticism tend to be more emotionally stable. They are even keel and they can, withstand a large deal of different traumas without losing their cool and going into complete psychiatric disorders. If you're low in neuroticism, you may consider aligning your purpose to higher stress situations, perhaps a combat role in the military where you can remain cool and not become psychologically impaired under high amounts of pressure and stress. And on the contrary, if you are higher in neuroticism, you may consider aligning yourself and your purpose with something that is relatively low stress as to not trigger a negative feedback loop in your brain. So we've covered the Big Five personality traits, and that's under the Ocean model. And understanding these Big Five personality traits is really a great way to know how to align your purpose. The next facet to consider when you are doing this analysis would be your skill set. Now, there are two different kinds of skills that you have, or I should say two different classes of skills that you can have as an individual, and this would be acquired skills and natural skills. Acquired skills are typically something somebody gets from spending large amounts of time in a specific discipline. Now, just because you have a set of acquired skills does not necessarily mean you will like these skills that you've developed, because maybe you hated the job. However, this doesn't, discount the skill set that you've gained from that job, and perhaps you could apply it in a different area. So in understanding your acquired skills and where you spent a lot of different time in various jobs, you can begin to ask questions like, am I good with my hands? Or am I good at analyzing large amounts of data? Or other questions along those lines, so you can know exactly what acquired skills you've received over time. In the realm of natural skills, this kind of deals more with your unique biological and neurochemical makeup as an individual. This would include things like verbal fluency, abilities to memorize large amounts of information in short periods of time, or being extremely capable of solving logical equations in short periods of time. So natural skills are something that you've pretty much had since childhood, and these are traits that can be found through this analysis. Another realm to consider during the analysis that you're doing for aligning your purpose and struggle would be the environment or background that you were, brought up in, or that you've spent an extended period of time in as an adult. The culture that we exist in has a huge impact on how we are formed as an individual. Different cultures find specific traits desirable, and as a result, we cultivate the traits that our culture at large finds desirable. So, for example, conscientiousness is one that in Western cultures is often seen as very desirable. And we kind of run around with pride when we've said that, oh yeah, I worked like 15 hours today, what's up? I got like no sleep. Another facet of our environment would be the people that we spend time around. You know, our friends have a huge impact on our psychological development. We are most like our 5 closest friends. Are your friends higher in openness? Are they creative individuals, and do they encourage free thinking, or are they extremely rigid, and do they view the world in a very specific way? Because if you spend time with individuals who look at the world in a very specific way, most likely some of that is going to rub off on you. So our friends, which are part of our environment, will ultimately condition us in specific ways. You can also consider if you were brought up in a tumultuous background. You know, in your childhood, was there a lot of infighting within your family? Did the mother and father have a divorce? Or were there lots of traumatic events that kind of dictated your day-to-day life as a kid? This will lead to higher degrees of neuroticism and negative emotion as you go throughout the world in your adult life. So considering your background in terms of your upbringing as a child is a huge facet to consider when you are doing this analysis. And the last of these 4 facets to kind of consider when you're doing this self-analysis or discussion with somebody who's close to you would be your physical attributes. Are you physically gifted? Are you able to do specific things within the realm of strength? Do you have a high level of endurance? If this is the case, well, you may consider aligning your purpose to something that is more athletic. If you are not gifted in this specific realm, well, it's pretty easy to see this is one that doesn't take too much analysis, as, you know, you can tell right off the bat, usually from a young age, whether or not you are physically gifted as an individual. So in understanding your unique characteristics, you can begin to place your efforts in appropriate places. The positive emotions will come once you've established goals based on your purpose. And this is the exciting part of the journey, because as you are progressing towards your purpose and you're moving upward, you will begin to experience more dopamine, you will experience more serotonin, and we enjoy the struggle. I've talked about this in so many episodes, but my goodness, we thrive from a good struggle as human beings. And when we reach the top, we are not happy. We want to constantly struggle, and we want to leave our creative mark on this world. So finding purpose may require a bit of experimentation after you've done the analysis. You may have to go out and try some things and put what you've thought about into action. Making mistakes is going to be part of the process. You have to be a bit courageous as you go through and do this. Expect to become uncomfortable and be prepared to mess up a little bit. And this will help you further clarify exactly where you need to put your efforts and what you need to work on. Discipline through making mistakes is the key. You may deviate from your long-term purpose to kind of compensate for some of the pain you may experience in the form of, well, Netflix binging or some money or drugs or romantic pursuits. So there's a lot of distractions that we can come across as we are pursuing purpose. However, it's important that we don't spend too much time in these short-term pleasures as to continue moving towards the long-term goal, which is discovering a true purpose and developing the purpose so that we can have a good struggle in this life. Results might not be seen now, they may not be seen in a month, and they may not be seen in a year. However, persistency is the key here, and you have to remain with discipline as you go through and you do this process. Be practical in your experimentation. We all have our basic needs that still need to be met, so perhaps you have a job on the side that makes money, that way you can feed yourself, and you still have housing that needs to be paid for. So take care of these basic needs and have a job that allows you to meet your needs. But as you are, let's say that this job doesn't align with your ultimate purpose, well, spend time developing your purpose, spend time every single day and schedule it. And as you become proficient in your purpose, well, monetization will come from that more likely, because you become so unique and you become so good at what it is that you love that people will want to pay for it, and you can ultimately make a living doing something that you love, which is the goal for everybody. We want to be able to feed ourselves, to have housing, all while doing something that we love. We don't want to be on the hedonic treadmill where we're working a job that just absolutely sucks. That's a terrible feeling. You want to go to work feeling like you have a purpose, feeling like you're making a difference in this world. And to do that, well, find ways to monetize your purpose. So passion and drive are going to follow a rational decision to pursue a specific path, not the other way around where passion and drive and purpose find you. I mean, this might be the case for some people where they come into this world with some specific purpose, But more often than not, this is not the case for the average individual. You have to sit down and do the analysis, do the inner work, and do the thinking that is required to discover your purpose. Thereby, you can combat nihilism and terrible feelings of depression and anxiety. The search for purpose is in itself purposeful. In establishing purpose, the individual will no longer question the meaning of existence, and you can become comfortable being present, making progress towards goals, and developing skills using the gift of time to the fullest. Don't pursue a job that you hate, my friends. Spend time doing what you love. Ultimately, there will be a way to monetize doing something that you love. It's just a matter of spending the time and doing the analysis and aligning your purpose right. So, this is how to combat nihilism. Align your purpose to your specific makeup as an individual, do the inner work, and thereby you can get rid of feelings of depression and anxiety, and thereby you can establish that you as an individual have a purpose on this world. Thank you for joining me on today's episode, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye-bye.